Let's get into one of our favorite segments here, our starts of the week. We're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. And our starts of the week are guys that we expect to outperform expectations, whether that's a stud who's in a tough matchup after a down week, whether that's a guy who may be a streaming option like a quarterback or a tight end that we expect to have a good game. Yep. These are guys that we see a high chance to outperform expectations here in week 4. And Alex, I'll pass it over to you for your quarterback start of the week.
All right, Steph. After a down week last week when a lot of people rolled him out there on Thursday Night Football, I'm going with the stash. I'm going with Gardner Minshew against the Cincinnati Bengals. He struggled without DJ Chark last week against the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football, but I have confidence rolling him out again in this game. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals defense is not great. They look good on paper against the quarterback. I think they're 7th against the quarterback in terms of fantasy points allowed per game, but it's been Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, and Carson Wentz, all guys who are struggling right now. So the Bengals are 24th in the NFL in yards allowed per game, and I think Gardner Minshew is going to pass the ball all over them. I think James Robinson will have a good game here as well. But look, on the other side of the ball, something we always look for in fantasy are teams with bad defenses, because if their defense is giving up a ton of points, they're going to have to score a bunch of points. The Jacksonville defense is terrible. They got absolutely knocked around by Miami last week, and they're giving up 28 points a game. Gardner Minshew's going to have to throw the ball a ton. We've seen it the last 2 games. Minshew has thrown the ball 40 or more times in the past 2 weeks. I think in this one, it's going to be Joe Burrow and Gardner Minshew going at it back and forth with a ton of passing attempts. So I think it's a good one for Gardner. And if Chark can get back in the lineup, it'll help. He's questionable right now, but he practiced in a limited capacity today. It looks like he's trending towards playing this week. So I think that contributed to some of the struggles last week without DJ Chark. But if you picked him up last week and rolled him out there on Thursday night against the Dolphins and you were disappointed, don't panic yet. Minshew Mania will be back, and he'll have a good one this week against Cincinnati.
Well, you talked about the stash. Let me talk about the beard for a second, because my start of the week is Ryan Fitzpatrick, Fitzmagic. A little bit of that here against the Seattle Seahawks. And bottom line is, the matchup's good. He's going to need to air it out to keep up with this monstrous Seattle offense that is just moving right now, putting up points on everybody. And the Seahawks are 31st against the quarterback position. I do think that has been inflated a little bit because they've played the Falcons, the Patriots, and the Cowboys. But I do expect Fitzmagic to be able to put up points in this game. He had 24 and 25 fantasy points the last 2 weeks, 2 passing touchdowns in both games with 1 rushing touchdown against Jacksonville. And something that's kind of sneaky about Fitzpatrick, you don't typically think of this, but he does have some low-key rushing upside. He's 11th amongst quarterbacks in rushing yards, averaging 23 rush yards per game. So it gives you a little bit, 2 points, 2 fantasy points as a floor, just a little premium tacked on to his stat line. You love to see that. And then he's 2nd amongst quarterbacks in red zone carries per game with 6 already on the year. So if it's not Jordan Howard cramming it up into his O-line, then it's Fitzmagic with those QB sneaks, and he's willing to put his body on the line to make plays. I'm all behind Fitzmagic here in the Seahawks matchup.
I love it, Steph. Now let's go ahead and move on to the running back position. My guy's Kareem Hunt. We talked about this Cowboys matchup for the Browns earlier. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more than they have already this season. And look, Hunt has been balling out this year. He's the RB13 right now in full PPR, so he should be a locked and loaded starter. And if you have Kareem Hunt, you're probably feeling pretty confident because he's gotten the touchdown so far. But I think he can succeed here against Dallas, even if he doesn't get into the end zone. I mean, there's going to be plenty of points in this game. The Dallas offense is elite. Their defense is not. And if you look at what Kareem Hunt's done so far this year, even when the Browns are up in games and they're just trying to run out the clock, it hasn't been all Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt's averaging 13 carries a game this season, only 3 receptions a game for someone who is essentially the Browns wide receiver 3. So in a competitive game here, I expect the Browns to need to put up points, to throw the ball a little bit more than they have here in the past 2. I think he's going to see 4 to 5 receptions in this one, along with 8 to 10, maybe up to 12 carries on the ground. And with that kind of receiving baseline, I think Kareem Hunt is going to have a really solid game here. If he gets into the end zone again, he's going to be a top 10 running back on the week. I'm feeling great about Kareem Hunt. And again, this is the start of the week because I feel so, secure and confident in him as my RB2. And I think you should be locking him in every single week moving forward until he shows you otherwise. and start to have dud games. But he's extremely involved in this offense, and it truly is a 1A, 1B in Cleveland, with both of those guys having a ton of
Quick
value.
dynasty question. I'm asking for a friend. Would you start Keenan Allen or Kareem Hunt in your flex here in week 4? Keenan Allen up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who'd you go with?
Well, this isn't going to endorse my start of the week very well, but I'll still start Keenan Allen. Ride the hot streak, man. Keep riding the hot streak.
19 targets cannot be ignored.
19 targets,
and
that's
Tampa
ridiculous.
Bay is giving up some yards through the air. So let me talk about my running back start of the week here. You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it is James Robinson with the Jacksonville Jaguars up against the Cincinnati Bengals here in week 4. Cincinnati is 28th against running backs, giving up 155 rushing yards per game.
Brutal.
And one of the reasons why I love Robinson this week and every week pretty much is regardless of game script, Robinson is a safe option. He's a full-time primary workhorse back in the NFL, and if the Jags go up in this game and they're leading, then Robinson's going to get the ground usage where he can break off chunk plays. He's had multiple runs over 15 yards this season. He's 10th in evaded tackles so far on the year, and he's seeing 2 red zone touches per game. And averaging a touchdown per game, 2 coming against Miami last week. So if they're up, benefits for James Robinson. If they're behind for whatever reason, then Robinson's going to get plenty of passing work. He's seeing 4 targets a game, and he's currently 3rd amongst running backs in receiving yards. So I'm willing to plug in James Robinson again after that 30-point explosion. Keep enjoying that waiver value that you got on J-Rob.
I love it. I mean, he's an RB2 for me right now, rest of season. So I certainly love the matchup this week. And Steph, it looks like we love the Jaguars and the Dolphins this week because my wide receiver start of the week is Devante Parker in that Seattle Seahawks matchup. You already laid it out for us. You know, if Fitzmagic has a huge game, it's probably going to come on the back of Devante Parker here, especially if Fitzmagic does it through the air and without those legs. But look, Devante Parker had a disappointing start to the year. He was banged up with that hamstring injury. He played the Pats and the Bills in the first 2 games, really tough matchups. But he's still putting up 12 PPR points a game, so he hasn't completely killed you. If you're disappointed in what you've seen from Devante so far, I mean, he's going to go off in this game against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are giving up 430 pass yards a game, last in the NFL. This is going to be a shootout. It has huge potential for an incredibly high scoring affair here. And so I think Devante Parker is going to absolutely eat in this one. I think he could see 10 targets, get 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. That's the kind of stat line we could be looking at for Parker here in week 4. It's disappointing, Steph, because in our home league, I just gave up Devante Parker in a trade to pick up Adam Thielen. I do like Thielen more rest of season, but it was so hard to give up Devante Parker this week, knowing that he's probably going to explode against the Seattle Seahawks. I love him. I'm willing to roll him out there. And another quick hot take, Preston Williams, I know he's been super disappointing. He could be an interesting flex option as well if you're desperate. Roll out these Miami Dolphins pass-catching options here in week 4.
Nice. Like that start of the week there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that matchup. Looks like we love it everywhere for fantasy as we get into our tight end starts of the week. But my wide receiver start of the week is DJ Moore. He disappointed last week against a solid Chargers defense. He's currently the wide receiver 28, so you're probably a little bit disappointed with the value that you've put into DJ Moore, probably drafting him back in the 2nd, maybe 3rd round. Plug him back in. Keep plugging him back in because he's against the Arizona Cardinals here in week 4. And even though on paper Arizona has been a solid matchup against wide receivers, the game script should be so juicy in this one. The Panthers aren't going to be able to stop Arizona from scoring on the offensive side of the ball, and by extension, they're going to need to pass. We've seen that volume through the air been extremely high for Teddy Bridgewater, and they're going to have to do this all year, and they're going to need to put up points. DJ Moore saw 13 targets in week 2. I think you could see that type of volume again here in a relatively soft matchup, and he's being relied upon in this offense every single week, even if the box score doesn't say so. And a lot of people look at Robbie Anderson as a guy who's broken out and really competing with DJ Moore as the one. I would strongly disagree and say he's still the clear 2 because DJ Moore is 5th in air yards. He's still 3rd in the league with a huge 48% of total air yards from this offense. So he's being relied upon, even though Robbie is the one who's having the breakaways and the touchdowns. DJ Moore's 7th in the NFL in deep targets. So he's really getting more of like what we typically think of Robbie Anderson as his pure deep threat. Moore's operating in that same way with a quarterback that we think is more conservative and check down heavy. I think we're going to start to see a little bit more of that, maybe with Mike Davis in there. That does change the offense overall. But right now, DJ Moore's averaging 17 yards per reception. The red zone usage hasn't been there, but that's really never why we like DJ Moore. I think he's going to be a trustworthy option. Don't let the down week cause you to bench or trade DJ Moore in a matchup where he's going to be necessary if the Panthers want to compete.
I love it. And quickly, before we get to the tight ends, this is why you look at more than just, the Cardinals, what you said are first against wide receivers so far this year?
Yeah, they're like top 5.
You have to look. The reason you have to look beyond that is because it's been 3 games. One of the Cardinals games was against the 49ers, who pretty much have no wide receivers. And then another one of the 3 games was against Washington, who has Terry McLaurin and a bunch of JV guys. No disrespect to Steven Sims. But you just look at, 2 of the 3 games, and there's essentially no threats at the wide receiver position outside of Terry McLaurin in those 2 games. So that's why, they're giving up points. And they've had pretty easy matchups so far. Kenny Galladay had a decent game last week for Detroit against Arizona, but just had to throw that in there. Got to look beyond those matchup numbers, especially this early in the season. But let's really quickly hit on our tight ends. Mine, you're probably not wanting to start, but I'm telling you to roll him out there. It's Evan Ingram at the LA Rams this week. He's had a really rough start to the season, but the Giants have had a brutal schedule. They started the year with Pittsburgh, Chicago, and San Francisco. The whole Giants offense has really struggled. And then week 2, we obviously see Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard go down with injury. It seems like they're still trying to pick up the pieces from that fallout. So here against the Rams in week 4, their defense is still solid, but we saw them just give up 3 touchdowns to the Bills tight ends last week in a super high scoring game. This Rams D, they're middle of the pack in yards allowed per game, middle of the pack in points allowed per game, and against the tight end position. So Evan Ingram, I think, can get it done. With Shepard and Barkley out, as I mentioned, Ingram is still seeing the targets. He's getting 7 targets a game right now. In a slightly better matchup for Daniel Jones in this offense. Someone who can take, these tight ends, you want someone who can take a 50-yard touchdown to the house. Noah Fant, George Kittle. Evan Ingram is one of those guys, had like a 70-yarder last year. So I love him to see volume in this game. Pretty good chance to get into the end zone as well. If you've struggled with Evan Ingram so far this year, give him one more chance here in week 4.
Not bad, not bad. My tight end start of the week goes back to the Dolphins and the Jags matchup because my start of the week is Mike Gesicki against the Seahawks. So it looks like of course we're starting everybody on the Seahawks side of the ball that we possibly can. I think we're saying here, hey, go ahead and start the Dolphins. Don't be afraid of the Seattle matchup. We love Fitzmagic, and if Fitzmagic is going to have a good game, I think Gesicki is going to give you what you're looking for in the tight end position. You talked about Devante Parker as your wide receiver start of the week, and he's still been dealing with that hamstring issue, kind of banged up, not able to show the explosiveness and the speed to get downfield. They're kind of using him in different ways, underneath, ins, outs, as opposed to posts. But looks like Mike G here, Gesicki, is the main option downfield for Fitzmagic through 3 games. We know Fitzmagic loves to air it out. He leads the Dolphins, Gesicki does, in average depth of target. He leads all tight ends this season in air yards, percentage of team air yards, and average target distance. On top of that, he's 3rd at the position in red zone targets. So when the Fins are in comeback mode against Seattle here, a defense that hasn't been able to really stop anybody, Mike Gesicki's going to see some volume, and he's going to see some downfield looks. Think of him like a Mark Andrews where, no, he's not going to be a yards after the catch monster, but he's going to be looked at early and often, up the seam, down the field. He's playing 69% of his snaps from the slot, which is just fantastic to see from my tight end for fantasy. And we love the matchup. Love Gesicki as a player, even though he's, again, not the most athletic guy in the world. He's going to be able to go up and make some plays on some people. I think he can see a touchdown in this one.
Love it. It all ties together. Devante, Gesicki, Fitzpatrick. It's all here. Love these starts of the week, Steph. I'm super hyped to see some of these guys, especially because some of these guys have been disappointing. I'd love to see some bounce backs.